over 15 months since football was suspended in this country when the number 12 documentary hit. But that also meant that football in the country had been given a second lease of life. Today on The Tracker, I'll be talking to one of the men who has put himself up to lead the rebirth of football in the country. Fred Pappoe is my guest today on The Tracker. Mr. Pappoe, it's nice to have you on The Tracker.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Let's get into conversation of where you've been, because I remember you were quite prominent in media circles until up on when you left office, being a GFA vice president. What have you been up to since that time?
Well, I've been up to quite a lot. I think I caught up a bit of my social life, which I lost one way or the other once we are put in the public light, for quite a long spell of time. I'll say about 13, 14 years. And then, I went back to cooler aspects of life.
Okay.
But they're not so totally out of football, because I still remain a director of Accra Great Olympics. I got myself appointed as a patron of one coast football club for destitute and then children, underprivileged children, based in Jamestown, Jamestown and Colegono. And then I also spent quite some time also following my young boy Godwin Atram, who I took as a youngster at age 14 or so. Wow. Then brought him to Olympics together with his peers, Osei Boateng, Dankwe, Aziz Ansah, Awulekwe, Christopher Apeleti, and the rest. Then he went, after a very successful football career, he went into coaching, and then he established an academy. Yeah. So I was more or less like an advisor there. So definitely, I didn't really go out of football. I was in other aspects of football which I found were less intense, I would say.
Now, obviously, you are seeking to occupy a position which is an elevation of what you previously had. That means more of a public spotlight on you. Before we even get into the nitty-gritties of that, who is Fred Pappoe? Give us a little sense of your upbringing, where you were born, your educational background.
Oh, okay. Fred Pappoe I was born a little over 54, 55 years ago, wow. I'll say, to a very humble parentage.
You're born in Accra?
I was born in Accra. Specifically, I was born in Colegono, but my parents, my dad comes from Jamestown, or my dad came from Jamestown, so I would say I'm a crossbreed, Colegono and Jamestown.
Nice.
Then I grew up in those two neighborhoods, I'll say, until around age 11 when I went to start my secondary education at Presec Legon. I was there for 7 years. We were the old school, so I ran up there up to the sixth form. I'm sure aspects relating to what I studied in the rest, we can talk about that later. So from Presec, I went to KN University. It was then UST. Okay. From 1982 to read development planning. I did that up to 1987. Mm-hmm. And then for 2 years after that, I did my national service, still on campus as a teaching and research assistant in the Department of Planning. Just before I finished, I was actually pushed from the university to join the then newly established UNDP Habitat Planning and Policy Unit of the Ministry of Works and Housing as a young housing policy planner. So I think I worked there for quite some time, from 1989 all the way up to 1996. When I left to join Danida, the embassy of Denmark, as a project officer. I started as a project officer. I ended up staying there for about 16 and a half years or so, rising up to the rank of a deputy program coordinator, during which period I handled quite a lot of tasks, which took me almost across every corner of Ghana, doing development work, and then also in the last days too, I was assigned some portfolios in Liberia. So I combined the two. Then I'll say for 2 years after that, I said I'd had enough of this 8 to 5 work. Let me do some private work of my own. So I started my consultancy firm. And that was when I realized I'd made a mistake. I thought I was escaping 8 to 5, but with consultancy work, it wasn't 8 to 5. It was from 1 a.m. to 1 a.m. Yeah, but it was interesting because you learned a lot of new things. new task, and then you never knew the nature of the next job. You know, but then as a training development planner, it also brought your skill to test. So I had a very interesting spell until I got poached by another Scandinavian country, the Norwegian government or the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to come into their business section. So I spent quite some time there as a senior business advisor with the Embassy of Norway, looking at business issues between Ghanaian companies and their Norwegian companies and their Ghanaian counterparts. So a bit on the work side, that's Pappoe, yeah.
Now, one would almost say that you stumbled into football, given the kind of background you've given me. How did the whole football activity begin for you?
I didn't stumble into football at all. I didn't get into football by accident. I was actually born into football.
Wow.
Yeah, at a very tender age. I grew up in a family. If you get to Jamestown, on the Commodore Street, specifically house number D61 /1 Commodore Street. I don't know whether they still use the same address if they knew this thing. The family is a family of sports enthusiasts, right from my grandmother, who used to sell and prepare bull fruits at the race course. And then my aunties and then my uncles, everybody was, it was a split in the family. Half of my uncles were with House of Folk, and then the other was with the Graduate Olympics. Specifically, my daddy was there, so you know what will happen,
Okay.
So when I was growing up, I'm sure he had this very unique skill of knowing which matches Olympics was going to win. And then he was sending me to the stadium on those matches. So I grew up not believing Olympics could lose a match until I watched the first live defeat of Olympics at Ewak Sports Stadium. So that was what got me into Olympics, and then I stayed in it even after my dad passed on. I felt I had to keep on with the mantle because he was a known Olympics fan. So I was there so I was doing Olympics whilst going to school, all this pre-sec and all this. So all my friends, if you happen to get in touch with any friend of mine who went to pre-sec or tech, knew I was a crazy football person, Olympics, born and bred and things like that. Then I think what took me to football, mainstream football management, was quite interesting. Olympics and our issues, every time, one form of trouble or the other, but I know they'll slay me if they hear me saying it. But that's. So we formed this small supporters group. We called ourselves the Concerned Olympians.
Oh.
Yeah, and I happen to be one of the few young but very vocal guys.
How old were you then?
CEO Concerned Olympians, that may have been in 1980.
Wow.
84, I think I was 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I was very young, So anytime we came to the stadium.
So even before your stints with diplomacy and project management, you were still sort of.
The football was the base. I was deep in football before this diplomacy. I always say I've run a very dual life, a very proud life. I have this very active life and in football, diplomacy, and the rest. So there was this CEO group, Concerned Olympians, very die-hard Olympics guys, Aloe, Sami, Mr. Ayi, and the rest. And we always used to challenge the Olympics management, when we felt things were not going well. Then there was one very interesting guy, Mr. Setankra, may he so rest in peace. Yeah. So one day, as we came and after one of our numerous exchanges, and then as we were going, he just pulled me aside and said, he told me in Ghana that you think you can always be on the other side and be worrying us. We'll pull you to our side. And I said, which side? Are we not doing the same Olympics? No, he meant he was pulling me to Olympics management. But I told him I was in the university then, so So when I completed my national service and came to Accra, I got appointed. I joined Olympics management as I think I started as a member, then became the assistant secretary, and then secretary, blah blah blah. But there were very tough big guys there that I learned a lot from. Mr. Peridoku, Joseph Adekoka, Major Fred Sam, Mr. Joju Fosu, Setankra, Aloe, my good friend Ologwe Komodo, Lawyer Aro Solomon. Quite a lot of very tough guys. And then Joshua Alabi, Professor Joshua Alabi. Yeah, they were all there. Those were. So we really had to learn the ropes. Then at a point in time, I think I found myself in GACA. It was then called OGLA, Organization of Ghana League Clubs Association. Olympics then had two members, two slots. So Professor Joshua Alabi was one, and then they took me there. So we went there, and then we saw all these big, powerful guys, late Professor Mausi Dake, Alaji Jaola, Nana Batla, Mr. Yanchi, Janfi, Joseph Wallace, very tough guys, you know. I must confess that for the first, I think, 5 or 6 meetings that I attended, I couldn't even say a word apart from good evening or so, you know.
That's interesting.
Yeah, the arguments and the discussions there were really quite interesting. And I'm talking about, I think, the early 90s or so. So I was at Ogla, and then I became an active member. I stayed there for quite a long time. Until about 2000, the year 2000 or so, there were elections, and then I was nominated unopposed to be on the Ogla Executive Council. I joined for about a year or two, and then at that time we had this arrangement where there was a management board of the Ghana Football Association, with the government appointing 2 nominees, one of whom became the chairman, and then the other will become a member. Then the clubs too, through the Ogla or GACA, then would also appoint 2. One became the vice president, and then the other became a member. So the clubs decided to appoint or select Mr. Kwesi Nyantakyi, my good friend, and myself, to go on the management board. Kwesi was selected as the vice president, and I was a member. The government then has selected Dr. Nyaho Tamaklo as the chairman, and then Dr. Kofi Amwa of the Normalization Committee fame as a member, and then Professor Dankabi was the other member, making 5. We had a very good time there. That was around 2004, 2003, 2004, until 2005, when we had the new dispensation, which I'll call the, what do you call it? The Second Republic, as it were, where FIFA brought these new regulations for us, the change of structures. Then Mr. Nyantakyi went, he stood as a president and he won. Then I was also voted in as an executive committee member. Before then, it was an executive council, which we are now going back to. You know, I was also a member of the executive council from 2000 thereabouts. So at the first executive committee meeting, as prescribed by the statutes, we voted for a vice president, and then I became the vice president. I'm happy to serve on several committees, including the Black Star Management Committee. I'm sure we'll talk about that. You know, so that's, I've tried to, I'm sure, I hope I've not left out a lot.
Well, you've actually given us too much information to chew on, if there's anything like that. Now, to talk about where we are now in terms of Ghana football. Where were you when number 12 broke? What was your reaction to it initially, and subsequently the fallout from the members that were exposed on camera? How did you take that as somebody who had been in the industry a long time, gone through the ranks, to see our football being displayed to the world in such light?
Well, of course, I found it most unfortunate. And of course, as a Ghanaian, I don't think any of us took pride in that picture being created of Ghana, and for that matter, Ghana football, because at the end of the day, it affected all of us, one way or the other. It was quite unfortunate. Where was I? I was around, I was in Ghana, but then, like I did indicate, I had taken a back seat from a national level mainstream football, even though I was serving as, I served for some time as a chairman of a review panel or so, but then I resigned at a certain point in time. So, coming to say what I felt about it, I felt it was a bit unfortunate, and then to those who were specifically captured on the tape, I found it quite, once again, rather unfortunate and sad, because I don't think it's anything you wish for, even your strongest critic or enemy. You know, but having said that, I'm not one who dwells so much on the past, no matter how bitter or how good I believe. I believe we just need to learn lessons from those things, look at what took us there, how we can avoid it, what are the good sides we can, so that way we, as it were, cut our losses, you know, by learning the good lessons from that, you know. So that's what I'll say about number 12, but I don't think it's necessarily a very proud thing for us as a nation.
Now, it's giving us a second lease of life, and also it's put you in the position to be the man to make the decisions that matter in Ghana football. When you were vice president, or even when you started rising through the ranks, did you ever envision a point where you would probably be Ghana football's top person? And if you did, what changes did you think you could bring to the table?
I don't think it was something that crossed my mind by nature, you know. Even getting to the seat of the vice president or even a member, usually it's people push me. I get reminded that I can do it before I start. So it's not something that I've harbored as a dream that one day I'll be the president of the GFA. No. But then, coming back to your question, when I was the vice, I believed if you're a vice to someone, you must be loyal. Loyalty to me does not mean blind loyalty. If I'm supposed to be loyal to Mr. Nketsia, and Mr. Nketsia does not talk in a way that I find is okay, my sense of loyalty will tell me to tell Mr. Nketsia straight in the face. I will not care whether he liked it or not. That's what I feel I should do as a vice. And that wasn't the first time I'd been the vice president before. I happened to be the vice president of Katanga. When I was mentioning my program, I forgot. The fellows should forgive me.
You had some political experience.
Exactly. And being the vice president of Katanga, you were in charge
I have a good sense of what that is like.
You are in charge of welfare. And being in charge of welfare of those guys is no joke. So I've been that, and my president then was Sounds, Mr. Samoa. He used to be at the Ghana Trade Fair Authority, a land economist. And I did everything to the best because I felt his success was my success. His fall was going to be my fall. So I did it, and without necessarily having at the back of my mind that one day I'll be the president. I was just doing my service to the best possible way that I felt as a loyal person.
Now, you spoke about loyalty, and I want to hinge on that a little. We know that yourself as vice president, Mr. Nyantakyi as president, led Ghana to its first ever World Cup. That was hailed as perhaps some of the best times this country's football has enjoyed. What did we do right then? And tell us a little bit also about your relationship with Mr. Nyantakyi and how there was a fallout before you eventually left your position as vice president.
There was not, and there has never been a fallout with respect to my relationship with Mr. Nyantakyi. We had a very good relationship, I would say, a very good cordial working relationship to quite a great extent, and then some mix on the working side, So I felt it was healthy, it was good, very good, respectable distance.
Were you friends?
Well, it depends on what you describe as friends. I think we were friends, but there are levels of friendship or levels of intimacy. For example, the kind of jokes a certain kind of friend can crack with me, I don't think, and then there are jokes that we also crack at our level, So I think we're good. The separation from the GFA was not actually a separation. What happened was that I was a vice president from 2005 to 2011, and then our electoral system, just like we have now, was said that you had to go to the executive council before you got the chance to contest as a vice president. So we went for elections, I think in September 2011, and then the Division 1 clubs that I was representing at that time, unfortunately my club, Great Olympics, had slipped to Division 1. So I stood on the ticket of Division 1. There were 48 Division 1 clubs then. I believe there were about 46 or 47 who came to vote that day. Close to 45 of them retained me as a member, and then my colleagues who also contested, my good friends, Georgia Free, Osekwekwu Palmer, and Kwekwe Iya, were voted together with me to go and represent the Division 1 clubs. Then we went for elections for the vice presidency, and then I lost.
So you were seeking a renewal of your mandate?
I was seeking a renewal of my mandate, but unfortunately my colleagues on the executive council who formed the electoral college then felt maybe they could do with a newer, fresher face. So my good friend, the late Jordan Anabla, may continue to rest in peace, became the vice president, and then, but then I still had gotten the nod of the Division 1 clubs to be on the executive committee, so I couldn't say I was quitting because I was no longer a vice president. That wasn't the case. I was sent there to be an executive committee member, so if you go for vice and you don't get it, still get yourself. So I stayed there as an executive committee member for up to 2015. Then after 2015, I felt
you had offered enough to football.
I've had enough to football. Let me just try and catch up.
With the other side of your life.
I was losing so many good friends and relatives. So I moved out here.
Touch on the World Cup for us. How was that like? What was the planning process towards getting us to Germany? And what would you say that moment represents for our football?
I think it was a very significant moment. In the first place, I got inspired by one argument I once had with a big person in Ghana football at a certain point in time when Ghana had lost a match, a World Cup qualifying match, and I was so upset that I was like going into my elements, criticizing left, right, and center. The guy the friend made a remark that, but who cares about World Cup? Who told you Ghana can go to a World Cup?
Oh.
No, the guy, and I was jolted. Wow, what's this guy saying? I'm sure that may have been sometime in 2001, 2002, thereabouts. Yeah. So I just kept quiet about it. Then we came into office around 2005.
Yeah.
No, earlier before 2005, we had started the World Cup qualifiers in, I think, 4th June 2004 with Burkina Faso in Ouagadougou. Then we started assembling the players for our first assignment against Burkina Faso. Okay. That was when I saw the relevance of inheriting something from the past. We were going to play our first game against Burkina Faso. At the management board meeting when we were planning, a lot of ideas were brought up and things like that. I must once again commend Dr. Tamaklo for the leadership he gave us over the Nyao Tamaklo. And then Dr. Kofi Amwa kept making this point. I remember quite clearly that, look, it's about time we move from treating these boys as small boys. You have players who are playing in the Chelseas, Lyons, and the rest of the world. And then when you bring them, they are coming to play for you. You make them sit in the economy class. When they are traveling with their clubs, they don't do that. When you are coming down, when they come down to the hotel, you put them at, with all due respect, Wangara and those kind of places. That, look, it's about time we started thinking big if we wanted to achieve results. It really resonated with me. I felt the guy was, big businessman talking, and I saw quite a lot of reason in it. And we agreed. So we went and booked rooms at La Palme Hotel for the team. That was the first time we were going to that level. Benjamin, interesting. We started camping, I think, on Monday. We were going to play the game on, I think, a Saturday. We started camping about 10 days before. Yeah. You won't believe that for the first 4 or 5 days, there were just about 3 players in camp. Wow. When we had actually bought tickets and things for the players to come.
Why was this?
They had lost interest and pride in the national team.
So just before you had decided to make a shift from treating them a certain way to elevating them, they had already sort of had been agitating among themselves.
Yeah, because they were in that old world. They were used to the Black Stars where people had to buy their own tickets, and then it became a tug of war to reimburse them. They were used to the Black Stars where they were staying in small hotels, driving in some very funny buses, and then wearing unbranded kits and things like that, So the guys were not reporting to camp, and then they were trickling in then because they had been released to come and play for the Black Stars. They would arrive at the airport, they sit in their cars, and then off they went. I remember Alhaji Mekano, the late Alhaji Mekano, may so also rest in peace. Mekano would just call me, Chairman, the boys are used to tell me in Ghana, the boys have come and then they've just taken their car on their way to Winneba, to Swedru, wherever it is. There were some that he chased. I just told them to come back. The players who were then in camp, I remember John Mensah, the Jam brothers, Asamoah and Bafo. So we went around talking to the then skipper Sami Kufuor, Stephen Appiah and the rest. Finally, about 3 or 4 days to the time, the players started trooping in. Then we went to Burkina Faso. We lost by 1 goal to 0. It was a very tough game. I think we ended the game with 9 men, which was also quite a serious thing. That was a game, if you remember, that Kufuor had to play with one strap. Yeah. We lost and then we came down. Our next game was against South Africa. We corrected our mistakes and then we beat South Africa 3-0 or so at Kumasi. Then we realized that this thing was doable. We went to Cape Verde. No, not Cape Verde. We went to Uganda. We drew Uganda. Came back and then...
Not to cut you, but at the point, where did you get the funding for making such a big shift in how you were going to cater for the welfare of the players?
There was government funding, I'll say one. And then around that time too, it was just at about that time. By the time we played our second game against Congo DR, no, our third game, that was our first away game against Congo DR. That was when we were able to sign the GoFuel sponsorship deal. So that came in really handy. And then we followed it up with a Puma sponsorship deal and things like that. So suddenly the transformation process started coming up. And then the boys started responding to the environment we created for them. So at a point, by the time we played our third or fourth game, it had become a fierce competition for everybody to be part of the Black Stars. You know, so to cut a long story short, that was how it started. But the point is that after the second or third games, we realized that it was doable, that Charlie, this World Cup, which we will go some. You know, then the mentality quickly changed.
So we'll take a quick break here on the tracker. When we come back, Mr. Pappoe will be outlining his vision for Ghana football. Now, let's come to the present time. Now, like you always say, sometimes when these leadership positions are available, in your own mind as Fred Pappoe, you aren't really interested until somebody gives you a jolt and says, Fred, you are probably primed for this position. Is that what happened with this particular window? And what were your reflections when perhaps you were prompted?
Yeah, that's what happened. I'll say it really started happening way back in, was it 2017 or so? That was way before this, when I started receiving prompts that, look, you should consider going to take up this mantle. You know, so I started reflecting quietly. But then, as the time drew near, especially after the number 12 and the rest, and then the calls and agitations became more fierce and intense. You know, it was to the extent that I always keep joking that if I had declined, then maybe I should have thought of relocating to another country.
Talking about relocating and the calls that were coming. I heard initially from certain corridors that you were government's chosen person to become FA president. There were people who said that...
Which of the governments?
Good, I'm coming to that. There were people who said that you didn't have allegiances with this government, so that was going to be tricky. Now, from your own point, have you ever been approached by a government to say that due to your riches and experience in this field, we think that you are the one who should lead it and we are going to back you? Has government approached you, any official in any form?
Absolutely no. Absolutely no. I have very good friends in government. We talk about everything, but it's not. No, we talk about football too, but it's not an approach that Fred go for. No. I have very good, solid individual relationships with quite a lot of them. But no government has ever approached me before to go and contest any position in football. And like you did indicate, you saw the contradiction yourself that you felt initially you heard I was government's choice. And then later you said they said I wasn't.
That you belong to the
other side. You know, so I've lived that all my life, in my adult life. You know, some will say I'm here, others will say I'm here, but I just enjoy it.
Now, I've heard a lot of your fellow aspirants lay out their plans. Some have spoken about the need to revamp and fund Colts football. Some have spoken about the need to diversify from the Black Stars, the need to privatize the Ghana Premier League company and whatnot. As you aspire to be president, what's the central point of your leadership, the central point of your vision that you want to bring to the fore?
I'll say my vision will lie on two legs or two pillars. The first one is to look at the whole issue of rebranding, redeeming, and then reviving the brand Ghana football, which I'm convinced, and I'm sure there's no argument about that, that it's been battered. It's not at the state where we really want it. You know, so that's the first one. So we have to look at the brand perfectly. There are a whole lot of packages or interventions that are planned, which have been outlined in my manifesto to do that or to achieve that. Then the second aspect will be the core business of football. And my approach is that I'm looking at football as a pyramid. Every aspect of it. So we have the base, where we're talking about coast football. And when I'm talking about coast football or football, let me just make the proviso that I'm talking in generic terms, boys and girls. You know, so I believe
that's really good you mentioned that, because when we talk about football, even coach, we tend to neglect them.
Exactly. You know, so I always want to make it a point because it's very central. Genderizing football is at the core of my campaign. You know, so we'll be looking at the foundation, coast football. You know, to encourage it. Coast football is literally been crippled. It's just like the football at the national level. There are associations or there are areas where for 3-4 years there hasn't been anything due to a lot of organizational, financial, and technical problems. That is going to engage a lot of my attention. Now, addressing coast football gives you a lot of benefits. For example, you are assured of a solid base. You are assured of a generational solution to football. You know, when this 12, 13, 14-year guys. In the next 4, 5, 6 years, you are getting a very good stream through the Starlets, through the Satellites, through the Black Stars, local Black Stars, all the way up to. So you would have addressed that situation one way or the other. Then secondly, and more importantly, if we were to get a chance, I'll talk about a disconnect between football and the community.
Okay.
You know, there's no communal ownership or communal identification with football. Communities do not necessarily associate themselves with football.
I mean, like we have in England, you find that the people from a certain town or suburb are mainly, maybe 80% support that club.
Exactly. You know, we have that problem, and over the years, because of the actions and inactions of those of us football administrators who had chance to be at the top, we've alienated ourselves the more. So if we start activating coast football, it will be one way of getting the communities back into football, one sure way. Because I remember when I was growing up, for example, places like Alajo, Pehi, and the rest, I only got to hear of them the first time when you read Ghana graphics. So Nobo areas are going to play Pehi Great Faculties. And I'm going to ask my mom, where is this Pehi place? Those kind of things. So we will send football back to the communities. Now, people always make the point, they try to create a wedge or a difference between academics and coast football. I think the two can coexist peacefully. You just have to create the right frame of regulations for academies, and then coast football would also try. If you are addressing the issue of coast football, you are solving a lot of social problems too. Okay. You are keeping kids off the street, at least in a way, because there will be some form of institutional support or supervision on their lives. A typical coast footballer would have his coast father and then his biological father or biological parents, you know. So that is a way of doing things. We also talk about low attendance at our matches, low patronage. One of the reasons is because football has been cut off from the communities. They are more interested in the Chelseas, Leicesters, and the Liverpools and the rest than our own football. If you had a very solid coast football system, for example, maybe they'll be playing at this new pitch which is being prepared by Mr. McDan. Congrats to him. Made up of children from Labadi, Osu, Laboni, what do you call it, 37 area, Kanda, and the rest, you know. Then maybe one dynamic footballer comes up, you know, very striking footballer like Benjamin Nketsia, solid striker. He plays 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Then the next time you don't see Benjamin Nketsia again, maybe he would have outgrown the age group. Then you keep asking, where is Benjamin Nketsia? Then somebody tells you that, oh, Benjamin Nketsia has been signed by Midiama FC. The next time Midiama are coming to play against Accra or Folk, you think people from these communities will not go there to go and watch you?
Certainly.
You get me? So it's if you go to the base, it solves a lot of problems and then a lot of issues. You know, so that's going to be one of the pillars that I'm going to talk about. The other aspects of domestic football, autonomizing domestic football and the rest, those are all part and parcel of my campaign this thing. But then, if we're talking about giving local football, domestic football and autonomy, you cannot just get up from one day to the other. You must put there should be some conditions precedent. So we would have to work our way towards that. We're talking about having the National Division 1 League. It's my ambition. When my manifesto is read, that we'll see. But then that would also not be a jump from one step to the other, because you would have to look at the conditions within which the clubs are playing, even in these smaller zones. You know, huge cost of transport, risk, financial troubles, lack of sponsorship and the rest. So we'll task ourselves to try and address or meet some of these situations so that we set the conditions that will make it ripe within 2-3 years to move towards a larger scale Division 1. You know? So it's quite a lot of very interesting ideas that I have in my manifesto. At the right time, we'll see it.
Now, talking about ideas and elections and whatnot, there are those who also say that you form a part of the old regime. What do you have to say about that?
That's an interesting point. The old regime, I'm sure they are referring to the
Nyantakyi administration.
The Nyantakyi administration started in 2005, and I think it lasted until 2018. That's right. I was in it from 2005 up to 2015. What I always tell people who say that is just for them to go back and look at the FA during that period. You see, we shouldn't make it appear as if we have an FA or we had an FA which was entirely hopeless in this entire 13-year lifespan. That wasn't it. We are talking about an FA that went to the World Cup for the first time, and they not only go there as participants, but were able to, as first-timers, proceed to the next round, only to be booted out by almighty Brazil.
Yeah.
We are talking about an FA that was able to qualify for the World Cup 2010. They didn't only just go to participate there, but they made progression beyond what they did the last time.
Sure.
We went to the quarterfinals. We are talking about an FA that won the World Cup at the under-20 level, the first time by an African nation. We are talking about an FA that had the women's team winning all manner of medals here and there.
Yeah.
We are talking about an FA which had the Chan team winning silver, several achievements. Then even when you come to the human resources of the FA, we're talking about an FA that became so attractive even to CAF and FIFA that they had to come in and literally poach some of our officials, Mr. Nyantakyi, Mr. Fred Krenzel, Coach Otia Kenton, Tony Pappoe, and the rest, So it was not all gloomy, but definitely there was a period of time when it was gloomy. I don't want to apportion blames or take myself, but when people make those kind of statements, I would urge them to try and compartmentalize the era and then see who was where during which period of time.
Now, another aspect of our game that obviously sort of sparked this whole revolution that we have now is officiating. What needs to be done with officiating? Because I've heard and experienced some certain officials, how much they get remunerated, how they get housed before matches, and one can say that you cannot really blame them for indulging in some of the acts they indulged in.
Yeah.
Where do we go with officiating as far as restructuring our football, not just on the league level, but in its entirety is concerned?
Okay, I think if we're talking about officiating, it's problem-plagued, it's problematic. But then one would have to deeply analyze the problems. And then one set of the problems is what we talk about, the conditions under which officials operate. Are the conditions conducive enough for them to give up their best without any fear or favor? In most cases, it's not the case. Because like you are saying, the man goes to the center, he has to be accommodated by the home team, he has to be fed by the home team. It's not everybody who will sit with somebody and then eat food, the person pays, and then 2-3 hours after that, you are punishing the person or you are not giving the person the favor he or she expects, whether right or wrong. The fact of the matter is that we would have to look at avoiding the conditions which would make these referees prone to corruption or corrupt practices. That is one side of it. Another side of it is that I believe the assessment system is not so strong and very cogent, in the sense that we had a system at the point we started introducing independent assessors. They'll go to the stadium, they are supposed to be independent assessors. Then the man will walk to the referee's dressing room and go introduce himself that I'm your independent assessor. Those kind of things, we must look at these systems. How are the referees graded? What happens to their grading? If you have a referee consistently scoring low, wouldn't that trigger some alarm bells for attention to go to that referee? So all those things are there. At the bigger level, so we would have to be addressing this system of assessment, vigorous use of information by way of the way they've been assessed. We make sure the conditions that will expose them are blocked as much as possible. We would have to seek aggressive sponsorship to make sure that at least there's a guarantee, because referees are mediators or arbitrators. Those people should be, even at the national system.
They should be beyond.
They should be beyond reproach. If you look at our judiciary, you see they are insulated. If you look at SHRAC, you look at our independent institutions, Electoral Commission and the rest, there's a certain way. So you cannot treat referees the same way as we treat our players. Definitely we have to look at it very, very clearly. And then more importantly, I believe we also need to create some kind of competition. Nothing prevents us. We have the security services as members of our Congress.
I was actually going to touch on that because you spoke expansively about the base of the football. But I'm sure that in the time when you were coming up, the security services were a prominent part of our sports.
Exactly. I'm sure I mentioned I went to watch the first match I watched where we lost. It was Olympics against one of the, I think, defense stars or so. So they used to have, and they produce very good players. You could see they were disciplined. Now, coming to the issue of refereeing, I don't see the reason why we cannot approach the military, the leadership, the military high command, and then talk with them because they have teams. They have the women's team in the elite league or so. I knew at a point in time they were toying with the idea of getting the second or first division team. We go to them and then we encourage them. We make a play that can we get about 40 to 60 volunteers from the military to be trained under a crash program from FIFA and CAF. so that we add them to the stock or to the number of referees we have to create some competition.
Okay.
Among the existing block, and then you and I know we are all Ghanaians. We don't need to run away from the fact.
Yeah.
We behave differently when we see soldiers. you get my point. And that's soldiers true. Also, by virtue of their training, typically also behave differently. They are very disciplined. Yeah. So we do that. That's quite an interesting approach to make sure the problem of officiating, because officiating is one of the reasons why people don't go to the stadium. It could cause hooliganism. It could cause violence. Sure. There will be injuries. Sure. There could be deaths. There could be stampede and the rest. Then also, if we did that, we are assured that definitely people, the predictability or the lack of predictability in our matches. In football, what excites you for you to go and watch, let's say, Olympics versus House of Folk on Sunday, is that you do not know who is going to win. But if you got to know on Friday that on Sunday, House of Folk are going to lose by 2-0, and then you go in there and you realize it's not by any mystical force or whatever it is, but the referee was predetermined, people will not go to the stadium. Sure. So these are a combination of approaches that I believe we need to go into.
Let's talk about the Executive Council or the Executive Committee, which you served on some time back. Now, one typical characteristic that marked Mr. Nyantakyi's final phase as president was the switch up of certain statutes and the removal of certain personalities, where it almost appeared as if there was a council, but certain decisions were being taken autonomously. What is the guarantee that with practically then the same pool of people, from the people we call football people, coming back to vie for positions, we won't go back to the old regime, and that this is not just a charade that everybody's playing up?
It's definitely not going to be a charade, because if you're looking at the caliber of people who are offering themselves up, it's not just the traditional old faces you've been seeing like mine and then some of us, but there are quite a number of very new faces that keep coming. And well, I hope and wish them well that they get a chance to appeal to the electorate and then come on board. But the thing is that at the end of the day, it has to do with leadership. If you have a leader who creates the environment for every member of the council to bring up whatever good stuff he or she has, then you are on the way to getting a system which is practicing solid governance. We might not have the situation where people come in and they do not talk. People come in, they do not argue. People come in, they do not offer new suggestions or even table new things for discussion on the floor. If we do that, then the quality definitely is going to affect us, and we'll be going back to square one, not square one, but we'll be going further down, deeper down. And also, I believe it's going to be leadership to create the right environment to get the best out of the council, and that's what I believe I have to, that I can offer very well as compared to some of my other contestants.
To take you back to what you spoke about on gender balance in our game, now, do you envision a point where women's football, the Black Queens, the Maidens, the Princesses, could possibly be given as much attention as their male counterparts, because they have proven that even with scarce resources, they are capable of actually bringing us laurels?
I do see that. It may take a bit of time, because even if you are looking at the level of popularity in Ghana, it will take quite some time for things to move. But I'm inspired or encouraged by the fact that if you look at the attention to world level women's football now, it's increasing. Almost all the matches they played at the World Cup and the rest got full houses. True. So definitely, if we organize or we did ours very well, we could start generating the interest. And if you start from the base, at the course level, at the school level, school sports and the rest, where people already growing up get to know that in my school team, there's nothing like a school team being made up of only boys, but we have a girls team too as well. And the interest will be generated. It will take a bit of time, but then if we actually committed ourselves to that cause, we should be able to get there. And mind you, the issue of gender is not just a talk, but we are talking about half of the world's population. In Ghana, it's about half of Ghana's population. True. So how do you run football just concentrating on only one half? It doesn't work. So we'll need to promote that, not just in terms of playing and the rest, but even in the governance of the game. Fortunately, there are small steps or small gains that have been made. Now there are about more women in Congress, about 4. And then on the executive committee, there's a seat for at least one woman. I hope and pray that more than one of them will get onto the executive council, because they are a very important part of the bargain.
Let me ask you a very strange question.
Strange?
Yeah, strange. Imagine the scenario that you were not vying for this position and you were on the outside looking in. You're looking at the current aspirants there. Would you pluck your heart out and say, this guy would have been great, would have been a good reflection of Fred Pappoe? Who is that guy within this current crop? You are free to say that nobody's actually.
No. I'll give you an answer.
Who would have been your desired candidate if you weren't in the mix yourself?
If I were not in the mix and I was sitting back and then I saw this was the array of guys who were going to contest, I would have stepped in. I would have stepped in there to be counted among the number.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah, I would have stepped in. Yeah, I definitely would have stepped in.
I mean, is it because you believe that your experience was missing from the source?
Yeah, you see, I think it's a bit of selfishness. It will amount to a bit of selfishness, holding back to society, not contributing your part to a crusade, not actually bringing your experiences, your knowledge, and your traits as a human being, your networks, and what you know and what you don't even know, to a process which affects the hearts and the passion of literally the whole country. People, there's this nuance about football people. It's unfortunate that we have only 120 people going to vote. But then when you're driving out on the streets, the coconut seller, the newspaper vendor, and the rest, they come to you and they say, "Oh, Chief, I didn't have yet to Abanibi." They keep asking. You could see these guys are.
They want to have an input in
the
leadership.
Left to them alone, they would want to have an input. So for me to just sit back, for my colleagues to actually, as it were, literally struggle to lift the game up would amount to selfishness and then lack of patriotism. That's why I'm offering myself. So if I start back and seen the mix, I would have jumped in.
Now, when you sat back, let's say from the beginning of 2018 till now, what were the pertinent issues that always bothered you? I mean, your manifesto itself is elaborate and you've spoken about the pyramid, but what are some of the football issues that you felt that were unacceptable? Some of the conditions you knew off the top of your head our football needed to go in the different direction with?
I think lack of integrity in our domestic competition. Lack of integrity. We shouldn't just pretend. There was a time, and I always say this, almost to the point of boredom, where I listened to a radio program on a Friday morning that was giving predictions on the score lines for games to be played that weekend.
Wow.
On Monday morning, just as I got to the office and I parked my car, they were running and they were proudly saying they got at least 6 out of 8 right, to the point of scores. I don't need to mention names, and I'm sure they know themselves. You get me? It got to a point where our matches were predictable. So why would a fan leave his house and then go and pay to go and watch it when the results have been predetermined? We started betting now. Betting is going on rampantly without any framework of rules and regulations. In the countries where it emanated from, they have very clear guidelines that if you are found to have flouted any of them, you may be kicked out of the sport totally or even jailed. You get me? So the integrity of our domestic competition became horrible. And it was something people were not looking at or people were not talking about. But that was one of the core reasons, because it absolutely permeated everywhere. It even went to the point, so if we did that, how sure are we that the striker you take as your top scorer will be a good scorer if you pick him to go and play in your under-20 team? Because he will be scoring offside goals or whatever it is, and because the referees are whatever it is, so many things. It affects. We think you are doing it just at this
affects level. The meritocracy system.
Exactly. Meritocracy was thrown to the dogs. It was a shameful thing, and I think we must all be ashamed of that. So that to me was a core area. Credibility. Look at national team selections, especially with the junior national teams. Everybody will tell you it's not fair. There are experiences of people who get kicked out of national camps, not because they are not good or not because they are not as good or better than those who have been selected, but because maybe They do not have any powerful force behind them.
Let me just stay with you on that particular
You're
note.
welcome.
I mean, from where you stand, or from your own experience, is the myth of player influencing in the national team real? Do big shots from teams influence coaches? Do coaches have players that they bring into the national team? And how do you curb such a system?
I think it's real at the junior level, junior levels especially. At the senior level, at least, not when I was there. At the senior level, I don't know, but I would want to believe it's a bit. But whatever the case, even if it's there or not, it's more pervasive at the junior levels. How do I prevent it? It's simple. I remember when we were there, when I was on the as a vice and even as executive committee member. Coaches were made to come and defend their call-ups. Okay. They were made to come to defend their final squad for competitions before the squads were even announced. Okay. And we, fortunately, we had a lot of very knowledgeable football persons around. Yeah. So you had to defend every single player you were calling, especially those that were not so obvious. You know, the question is, why are you choosing Fred Pappoe above Benjamin Nketsia? Can you convince us? Any good coach will start giving, okay, statistically, this one played more minutes than this one scores more goals, this one has got this attitude on and off the pitch, this one is more positive. You know, there should be justification. If you continue doing that and you insisted on that, anytime a coach is going to pick a player for reasons other than sporting or meritocracy, he will think twice. And that is something that I believe we have to enforce, because many a talent have been left to go rot. You know, and when these guys go back, you never know what they are going to do to their lives. You know, so I think it's even an act against God to do that to a player. You know, so definitely that is one aspect we really need to do something about.
Talk to us a little about player salaries. Now, I've heard stories about players earning as little as 50 Ghana cedis. I've heard stories where players have told me that in certain teams they were told that this is not a place to earn a salary. This is a place to get noticed, and then perhaps you can make the next steps into your career. Are we ever going to get to a point where a footballer in Ghana can make, say, 1,000 Ghana cedis?
You are right. What you are saying is perfectly right. You see, but I always want to look at the situation in a broader context. We have a league or a domestic football which is suffering from lack of sponsorship, from lack of finance. So, the team owner.
What do you think is the main reason for that? Because, for instance, from 2000, our football was attractive. Accra House of Folk, Asante Kotoko were poster names in houses. We didn't seem to have taken advantage of that era. I struggle to see how our football is perhaps going to get better talent-wise, or maybe more hype to generate sponsorship also.
It starts with the branding equation. If the lead institution is bruised, the brand is literally collapsed. Nobody wants to be associated with the brand. UBA Bank would not like to be associated with the GFA for whatever reasons. The GFA is going to be cash strapped. Now, its member units or member blocks, the clubs, would also suffer same. You know, so when it happens like that, the main source of income or revenue will be tilted towards what? Gate proceeds. Gate proceeds too, you have predetermined results of matches. There is hooliganism at the stadium. Who is going to watch the games for you to get money to? Teams have played in matches where whatever they got by way of returns was not enough to even fuel the car, a saloon car of the coach. It's common. It's, you know. So we create our problems, and then we live in the problem. So solving the problem is not just a matter of coming to make a pronouncement that I'm going to set a ceiling, a minimum ceiling, below which no player should be paid. Where is the club owner going to get money from to pay the players? I don't think it's the joy or pride of any club owner to pay his player 100 cedis or 50 cedis, or even to owe the player for about 6 months. Nobody likes that. But the fact of the matter is that they do not have the funds or the wherewithal to do that because of a myriad of problems we've created ourselves or which have been created for us. So that is where we have to start looking at the problem from.
Now, to wrap up the interview, I was at the Congress of the Normalization Committee, where certain changes were proposed to statutes, mainly the term of presidency for the incoming president and also for the executive council. Now, do you feel as if 2 terms of 4 years is a comprehensive enough time to get one's vision across?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you cannot get your vision across in 8 years, you cannot do it in 50 years. Absolutely, perfectly. You know, you don't need to hang on there. You can start the process of getting your vision. You can start working, putting procedures and structures in place towards a move to get your vision in place or your vision rolling on. And then if by the second term or so, when you leave, a good manager is a manager who set up operates even in his absence.
Yeah.
You know, the rest can follow. You don't need to be there. I believe the 2-term this thing is more than enough. It's good.
To wrap it up, what's your message to Ghanaians? Why should anybody be interested in endorsing you as the top man for Ghana football?
We know our problems. We have a brand which has gone weak and is causing a lot of problems. Low salaries, low attendance at matches, disinterest in our game, no sponsors coming around, disconnect between the communities and the rest. We have to arrest it. To arrest it, you need people with experience, people with knowledge, people with credibility, people with integrity, unifiers, people who can get the best out of the others, team players to do it, because football is a team sport.
Yeah.
And I believe these are attributes that Fred Pappoe has got. On top of my vision and then my mission and then the strategy areas and the different kinds of initiatives which I have lined up. You know, but the principal thing is that look at a person and ask yourself, is this man someone who is capable of saying or delivering what he's saying? And I believe in all sincerity, the answer, if you ask that question, will be yes. A vote for Fred Pappoe is a way towards restoring the brand Ghana football.
Mr. Pappoe, it's been enlightening speaking to you on the tracker. We hope that when that day comes, we wish you all the luck.
Amen. Amen.
So the rebirth of Ghana football is in motion, and the tracker will be here to monitor all of it right up until the end. Until same time next week, we'll see you on the tracker.